The other thing I find out that it's interesting that a lot of leaders don't know the difference between management and leadership. And, and what is that? So, I was talking to a client recently. He serves on a couple boards, and he was saying, I'm a board member, and there was a situation where, the person who's leading it said, they're upset with me because I brought something up to them, and and then I brought it to the meeting, this and that. And I said, well, I asked him, do you know what the difference between leadership and management? He goes, well, he said, what do you think it is, Arnell? So, well, let me do some research. And this is what I brought up to him. I said, leadership is to influence and empower. Management is to control and execute. So when that person, when you address it to them, when they sit down with you, were they influencing you, empowering you, or are they wanted to control you and execute? Were they trying to control or influence? He said they were trying to control. He said, huh, that's interesting. I said, how'd you make it feel? I said, it didn't make me feel good. I said, well, and it's interesting too, is a lot of times with people is they don't know the difference. They think they're leading, but they're really just managing. And then the other thing too, if you're serving and he serves on a board and he says, what do I do with it? I said, well, that's, it's not an easy question to answer. But I think the first thing you really have to do is know the difference. First of all, what leadership and management is. One's to influence and empower. The other one's is to control and execute. And he said that's interesting too, because if you look at it, the biggest challenge where most people don't that they struggle with, if you don't know um, about leadership and management, then let me lead into what I see many people in leadership roles now that they don't understand is that they will, if they're not, there's a habit by Stephen Covey that is called it's the fifth habit that talks about seek first to understand, then to be understood. So it's a powerful book on the 7 habits of highly effective people, but seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I see many people in leadership roles who don't seek first to understand. They seek to criticize, or they seek to tell. So you think they're seeking to understand, but I can tell the difference when they're seeking to understand, because they ask very good questions. They ask your background. They ask you what you're doing. They don't criticize. But then I find out people really seek to criticize, or they seek to basically tell what you do. And at the end of the day, when I was talking to this client of mine, I said, well, how does it make you feel? Well, it didn't make me feel good. I said, well, what do you, we did some research. I said, well, when you seek to not understand, criticize, or tell, you severely damage relationships, you undermine trust, and ultimately hinder organizational success. It creates fear and uncertainty. Nobody wants to speak up. I mean, I said at your board meetings, do they have healthy conversations? Do people say, hey, I don't think it's fair? They push back, or is it just everything's happy-go-lucky, hunky-dory, nothing really says anything, and there's no measurement of success, and it's because, yeah, that's it. I said, ooh. I said, do you run your company like that? He said, no, I don't. I said, how do you feel? I said, I don't know how to navigate this. I said, well, we can work through that, but at least you know the difference, right? And how it can affect morale by decreasing in motivation, how you can see the organization have more crisis and decline. And that's what happens when leaders don't know the difference between management and leadership. And then most importantly, they don't know that, they don't know how to seek to understand. And so that happens a lot.